Hey everyone, it's Lisa Sweeney here from Business and Heels, and congratulations on joining us for this discussion on gender equity best practices. It's a deep dive into the practices and behaviours that have led to these amazing individuals and organisations becoming award winners. Whether you're a dedicated equity advocate or simply curious, this is a discussion you won't want to miss. We'll be exploring this with our gender equity advocates, Maureen Migliazzo, Roman Rubacky, Shaun Cumming, and Steph Sands. So welcome to everyone. So let's begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we join today's meeting. For me, it's the Wathaurong people. Can I ask for all of those listening to add the people's lands that you're on today into our chat? And on our behalf, I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and future. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia, their connections to the land, sea, and the community. And I pay my respects to the elders, past and present. And we extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, many of you know we run the Gender Equity Awards for Australia. It's now in its fourth year, and I'm excited to say today we're open for the 2025 applications and nominations. So for any of you that are thinking about applying, you're going to get some amazing ideas of what some of our previous award winners have done today. So why are we doing these webinars? Well, because we want to accelerate gender equity. We want to make workplaces great places to be. So by sharing out best practice ideas and things that you can adopt, we hope you all don't have to go through the trial and error that these award winners have. So it's now my pleasure to introduce you properly to each one of our panelists. So first of all, Dr. Maureen Migliazzo is the Chief Operations Officer at Dentons, the largest law firm in the world, championing the Large Enterprise of the Year 2024 Recalibrate Gender Equity Awards, with a gender pay gap of only 4.1%, which is pretty amazing in the law field. Maureen is really proud of her work as a lifeline volunteer and connecting with people in crisis, and hopes to leave a legacy of ethical and principled leadership. So welcome, Maureen. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Now, can you just share with us why you're so passionate about gender equity?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for that great introduction. You know, what first drew me to Dentons was our mantra of being in and out of the community, a commitment that social impact isn't just a nice to have, but it's embedded in everything we do. And that resonates with my personal belief that real impact comes from tangible outcomes, not symbolic gestures. Meaningful change happens when we take deliberate action that improves lives, strengthens communities, and drives positive business outcomes. My volunteer work with LinkedIn has shaped much of how I lead. When you're connecting with people in crisis, you see just how powerful and essential it is to feel heard, valued, and supported. And you can also see the damage that comes from being overlooked or excluded. So this experience has taught me a powerful lesson. Workplaces must be spaces where people feel safe, seen, and empowered to thrive. And that's why I'm so passionate about equity. While I believe success should always be based on merit, rewarding work, hard work, and those who take opportunities, I also know that for merit to shine, we must first remove the barriers that prevent people from being recognized for their contributions. At Dentons, our social impact initiatives aren't just about ticking boxes, but they're embedded in our policies, our processes, and day-to-day interactions. We've made gender equity part of how we work, so diversity happens naturally. By ensuring people feel valued and supported, we hope to create an environment where they can contribute fully and succeed. You know, sometimes the solution is simpler than you'd expect. For example, we saw how small changes in language could significantly influence who applies for a role. By changing a job title from administrative assistant to legal assistant, we saw more men apply. In fact, male representation in our support roles jumped from 4% to 18% in just a year. So nothing else has changed. We still hire the best person for the job. The difference is that we attract a wider pool of talent, giving us more opportunity to hire on merit. And that's what gender equity is really about. It's not about favoring one group over another, but about removing barriers so that everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen, for sharing that with us. And wow, what amazing work you're doing. Shaun, I see lots of heads nodding because clearly everyone's in furious agreement with you. Shaun Cumming is the next panelist I want to introduce. He's the Managing Director of Barwon Water. Barwon Water delivers sustainable, affordable, innovative and reliable water and sewage services in the Barwon region of Victoria. And in doing so, supports the economic, social, cultural, environmental prosperity of the region. Over a 20-year career in the water industry, Shaun is committed to making a positive impact in the community and environment in a collaborative, commercial and creative way. Shaun's the proud dad of Sadie, Eden and Finlay, all three of which keep him and his partner extremely busy on the edge of mayhem. So welcome, Shaun. Can you share with us briefly why you're so passionate about gender equity?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. On the edge of mayhem and sanity, I suppose. But why am I passionate? From a personal perspective, having immigrated to Australia, I really have experienced the power of inclusion and the challenge of non-inclusive behaviours as well. I've had the fortune of living with and learning from and working with some amazing women that I deeply respect. And as I've learnt about those systemic biases that they've worked their way through to be who they are, my respect for them has grown even further. And then the other aspect is Finlay, Eden and Sadie, and making sure that I do the best I can for them to grow up in a world that has equity and for them to be advocates as well. At a business level, I'm super passionate about our organisation reflecting our community, and as we've gone through our diversity and inclusion journey and continue to, our business results have followed. So over the last 9 years, our senior leadership team's gone from 14% women to 50% women, and we've gone from an organisation that was mid-pack in terms of rating for customer experience and value to number one. And we're globally recognised for our innovative capabilities. And that's today. You look forward, we've got some big challenges: climate change, population growth, equity divides, and it needs different thinking. The thinking of the past won't solve those challenges, and that's where diversity and inclusion is so important.
Well, and it's amazing that Barwon Water is punching above its weight to be globally recognised, which is amazing. Well done. And our next panellist is Steph Sands. She's the Head of Inclusion CSR for Capgemini Australia and New Zealand. She fast-tracked Capgemini's D&I efforts to become the Employer of the Year of the AWEI for 2021 and 22, and now are known as a Platinum Employer. They've been awarded twice, and Steph personally, for the Recalibrate Gender Equity Awards for Best Enterprise, as well as for the Best DEI person. So Steph has a long history in the LGBTQI plus community. She's a Sydney Mardi Gras Hall of Fame inductee from 2014. Wow. ACON's Community Heroes from 2015, and AWE's National Outrole Model for 2021. And in 2023, she was named as one of Stonewall's UK's global change makers. So Steph's had an amazing history of making change in this. And you work for a massive organisation like Capgemini. So, Steph, can you share with us why you're so passionate about your work?
Yeah. I'll just firstly start and just acknowledge I'm on Bidjigal land here in Sydney. Beautiful day today. And just pay my respects to the Indigenous peoples. And I also want to say I accept the invitation to walk hand in hand in reconciliation, which I think we talk a lot about acknowledgements of countries that starts at meetings, but what are the actions that go with that? For every time I give an acknowledgement in one of these forums, I donate some money to an organisation, and today I'll be donating to Black Rainbow, just as a show of that reconciliation and that action. So I'm Steph. I use she, they pronouns. I don't prescribe to gender binaries. So when we talk about gender equity, I include all genders in there, not just male and females. And I think I'm so passionate about the work that I do because I believe everyone has the right and should have the opportunity to live their best lives, just in general, right? So that's in the workplace, that's outside the workplace, that's everywhere. And I grew up in a time where it was illegal to be gay. so here in Australia. So when I grew up, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how I was going to progress. And, my mother wasn't allowed to sign her own mortgage papers. So we've come a long way since I grew up as a child. And I think, as we progress as a society, there's still so many people who don't have the same opportunities as everybody else. So we have a opportunity in the roles that we do and in the workplaces that we create. And it doesn't matter what role you're in, to actually make change and to make sure that everyone has the same opportunities as everybody else. And if somebody needs a little bit more of a step up in order to get an opportunity in the workplace, then we should be able to provide that in a very balanced and meritocratic way. So that's probably why I'm so passionate, is that, I grew up in a time when I didn't have the same opportunities, lower class, working class from regional New South Wales, and just seeing how some of the obstacles I had to face to get to where I am today. I hope that, we can make some change, either individually or together, to make that a little bit less of a challenge for people coming up through, that we can help.
Well said, Steph. Thank you. And our final panelist is Roman Rubacky, an experienced diversity, equity and inclusion practitioner and principal DEI consultant at Roman Rubacky and Associates. He's worked in the research, university and the public sector, and in a number of DEI roles. He specialises in diversity data, literacy, gender equity and diversity equity. In 2024, he co-authored the COO Practitioner and was winner of the 2024 Individual Recalibrate Gender Equity Awards last year. So welcome, Roman. It's lovely to have you with us. Can you share with us briefly why you're so passionate about gender equity?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Steph as well, I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians on the lands in which we're meeting today, the Wurundjeri people for me, and pay respects to elders past and present. I had the privilege of doing a cultural education tour with the traditional owner at the lands of the Wadawurrung near Ballarat in Melbourne. A whole day. It was simply magnificent. But just a really quick one about myself. My mother's from Lope, my father's from Nitra. I'm a second generation migrant of refugee parents from Republic of Slovakia. And I grew up in the 80s in the northern suburbs with a single mother. My mum was a chemist. My uncle was a chemist. My brother was a chemist. My wife was a chemist. And I fell into chemistry. I think from first-hand experience, seeing the struggles, I think over the course, I was more aligned, maybe it's a genetics, with my grandmother, who ran a halfway house in Slovakia, nursing people back to health. And it reminds me of a quote I read recently, this by Daniel Dennett, the secret of happiness is find something more important than you are and dedicate your life to it. And I think from that experience, that's what sort of sparked the interest. I did a lot of complaints handling for 20 years. I was a union delegate, a contact officer. I joined in the late 90s a team that worked in equal employment opportunity. And so I really saw firsthand where things could really fall apart in terms of the structural and systemic barriers or inequities that exist. So a lot of my work is grounded in equity principles, ensuring people are treated with dignity and respect, have equitable access to employment opportunities and the ability to participate in all aspects of work and public life. And if you look at the evidence base in the human experience, we are running at a glacial pace. But I think I often say the glaciers are melting slower or faster than the pay gap at times. But for me, time and time again, through the work I've done with the evidence-based approach, I try to use more head, heart, and hand these days, is that over 25 years of work that gender equality benefits everyone. It's everyone's success. And that's the key message that when we look at public consciousness, that people are more than ready. So thanks for welcoming me, and it's terrific to continue or be able to continue to work with these groups and in this line of work. Thanks.
Thanks, Roman. And I love that quote that you shared. I think it certainly most of us can relate to it. So Much appreciated. But let's get started with our discussion. So we're going to kick off touching on recruitment. Now, Maureen made a really good point earlier about just, reframing the language. Shaun, with Barwon Assets, the company was largely staffed by men. Can you share with us, how you took it from that angle and actually got 50% women to the interview table?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And just for some context, Barwon Asset Solutions is a subsidiary business of Barwon Water, and it provides civil, mechanical, electrical, project and land management services to the public and private sector. And all those fields I just mentioned have been very traditionally male-dominated fields. And I think the intros everyone gave really gave that great flavour as to why diversity and inclusion is so important. And with that in mind, we had the context too when we were advertising for new roles. We were getting maybe 1 or 2 women applicants, but knew we needed to make a shift. And so we created the shift really in 2 fronts. One was increasing the talent pool to start with, and we really found that traineeships, apprenticeships, scholarships were the best way that we could actually influence and grow the talent pool. And the best thing is the trainee or apprenticeship or scholarship persons in your business already. So that's been fantastic. And then the other big dimension is how we engage with the market. And we got some great insights there by actually forming a focus group of women that were already working in Barwon Asset Solutions and asking some good questions around, well, what attracted you to the role? What do you enjoy every day when you're in the role? What's different in the role to, what you expected? And from that, we got some great insights with some simple changes that Maureen sort of highlighted at the intro as well in how we engaged with the market. So we changed the title of the roles that we're looking for from a field crew, from a field officer to a field crew member, infrastructure field crew member. We changed the language in our position descriptions and job ads. We got rid of all that technical water industry specific jargon that we live and breathe with every day, but makes no sense outside of the sector. We actually, highlighted, the qualities of the person that we're looking for, the outcomes that we wanted to achieve from the role, and the environment that you'd be working in, rather than the skills and qualifications that we're after. And we also highlighted the supportive team and leadership environment at Barwon Asset Solutions, the access for all genders to flexible work arrangements, and the variety in the role, the outcomes you can achieve in the role, and how the role benefits community as well. So a real kind of reshape from that technical focus. And at the same time too, we changed the person when you rang to find out about the role to one of our women team members, and made some great little videos of all genders sort of talking to what their day's like in the role. And can I just say that the switch was immediate and quite remarkable. So we went from sort of getting one applicant to 20 plus applicants when we went out to market. Our click rates on Work 180, the women's only job board, were improved by 500%. So from 200 sort of clicks to 1,200 clicks, and we've shifted in our representation of field-based roles in that business from 3% women to 30% women. We have a long way to go still, we continue to work on it, continue to learn too. And our current insights are, as we're growing as a business, we're going to the market very quickly and needing resources, and that's when we find it's a challenge when you go to the market quick and you're drawing from agencies and the like. So we need to work better and more proactively with the agencies we work with to get that their talent pool up as well. So. But yeah, and I highlighted some of our business results in the intro that's followed that shift.
That's amazing, Shaun. And I love the idea of the videos, to allowing people to actually see the diversity. Steph, have Capgemini done similar things?
Look, we've done a lot of those things, Shaun, that Shaun was talking about. Our industry is the tech industry, so we're a little bit behind the 8 ball to start with. But we have managed to increase our overall representation of women in the business by about 10% over the last 5 or 6 years, which is pretty good for a tech company. And we did it in a couple of ways. We're quite lucky in that we've got our global office has a mandated ESG target for the end of 2025, which was 40% women across our business globally, and 30+% women in senior leadership. So all of those targets then get cascaded down to markets, and we had then that mandate to go into a sort of a quota target based approach. That's changed this year. We now have gender ambition, and we obviously don't have quotas or targets in some countries in the world. But we still maintain a lot of what we did to build on that success. So 50-50 shortlists, and we know that is difficult in some parts of our business. In engineering, for instance, where we just don't have that pipeline of women coming out of universities or having those skill sets. So being able to really tap into those women's groups that exist outside our business to try and build those pipelines. We stood up a couple of programs around specifically recruiting in women into our relaunch program, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But what we did, we went to the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board to apply for an exemption to stand up that program, so that we could go out to market and just target women into our business. We also looked at things like how do we attract talent into our business, female talent into our business, by using the existing women in our business. So ensuring we have 50-50 recruitment interview panels, and if women wanted to talk to some of our senior leaders who also happen to be women, that we made them available at the time. We did a lot of language change, obviously, in our jobs descriptions, and created some really distinct diversity-based pathways for recruitment. So things like trans and gender diverse people who may have some difficulties in past resumes or CVs around experience because they may have been pre-transition or pre-affirmation of their gender. How do we navigate that through with respect and ensure that their experience actually lines up, and the interviewers who may not have a lot of experience in that sort of diversity actually understand, and actually we can create that equal and level playing field for all of our applicants, and the same for people with neurodiversity. So we did a lot of work in that intersectional space, because we know women are not just one thing. They're not just women. They can be diverse women. They can be diverse gendered women. They can be neurodiverse, or they may be living with a disability. So how do you provide that intersectional approach to really bringing in that diversity into your business? So there's some of the things that we did.
It's complex, isn't it? But there are some very common themes that are coming out of here. So, Roman, what else would you recommend companies consider?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I've got 3 quick points, but as Steph was talking, I was thinking about once working in the university sector in a Faculty of Science and Engineering, and I think around 5 years into our gender equity journey, the male Pro-Vice Chancellor said, if we had gender parity in our 3rd year science subjects, we'd double our enrolments. And so a bit of a light bulb went off there in terms of some of the motivation to really address women in STEM, and that's been going incredibly well. One of the 3 areas I would quickly talk about in terms of looking at recruitment is that many people might not come through mainstream employment channels. So when I was in emergency services, I tapped or got in touch with Amanda Lamont, who was the chair of the Australasian Women's Emergency Services Network. And we did all of our senior women led recruitment from that network. And similar, working in some of in courts, Victoria, there are a lot of, as Steph was saying too, there are a lot of groups out there, the Muslim Law Network, the Asian Law Network, the African Law Network, the Aboriginal Law Network, all waiting to really engage with the public service and the court services. And to respectfully be invited into those spaces, invited them, was a great opportunity to look at recruitment. Working in public sector for 6 years, second one's job design. And In 2016, most of the executive officer roles in the public sector was around 35%. And that incredibly jumped to around 55%, and it's been retained that way. And with the public sector, they really embrace flexibility. They, in some departments, they had the tag, if not, why not, options to actually create full-time jobs with the option of going point 8 or point 6. And COVID was a bit of a game changer too, I think, with men understanding a bit more around the emotional load and the invisible work that women were carrying. So often when I was in the workplace back then, my son, we still share the same dining table as we did when he was homeschooling. And I always flip the camera and say, hey, everyone, say hello to Harry, he's getting along. And they said, oh, you're the first man who actually mentioned it, that you're actually taking some responsibility there. So I think that was a game changer. But the third one, I think, is alternative recruitment processes. So I remember when the Recruit Smarter came out in the VPS, and I read through it, and we heard about blind recruitment and how do you eliminate subjective decision making. So in the disability space, when we're advertising for roles, the central criteria was the lived experience of disability, lived and learned experience as well. But we looked at how we weighted the interview process, because often that's where a lot of judgment comes in. Am I going to get along with this person if I'm going to work with them? So you need to look at an assessment matrix where you can attempt to have weighting by different sort of options, portfolio of work, interview, getting to know the person over coffee, and that's, I think, where some of the good disruption can happen. Yeah. So there's sort of 3 points that I had in mind. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. And Maureen, have you got anything to add on this score?
Yeah, I feel really passionate about recruitment. And Roman, I love the if not, why not? That's a great saying. But I've already mentioned how we've made changes to job ad language, but that's just a small piece of the puzzle. At Dentons, our headcount has grown by 37% since COVID. So you can imagine that recruitment has been a key focus for us. And to attract the right people, we've had to strengthen what we offer. In fact, we talk about it all the time. What else can we be offering? And of course, there are the usual perks, benefits, leave policies, and we're always working on our culture. But I think what truly motivates our people is opportunity, the chance to develop, grow, and build a meaningful career. And that's why we've created structured development programs that provide clear pathways for progression at every level. Our Pathway to Partnership is a great example. It provides employees with transparent guidance on what they need to achieve to move into leadership. And for those of you who don't know, the legal world, everybody always wants to be, or professional services wants to be a partner. So it's not something that people have to put their hand up for, but it's something we almost expect of them. And by creating an ethos where ambition feels achievable. I also want to talk about something that isn't just about what we do inside our firm, but recognizing the barriers that prevent people from even considering careers like law in the first place. We know that fewer men are choosing university as a viable path, with male participation in higher education now at record lows, which is pretty unbelievable. But the shift is concerning, and it tells us that many can't see this themselves in the kind of future we're here today trying to create. And if that trend continues, in a few years' time, we'll be having a very different conversation. So while we can't fix it, we can take a step to break down one barrier. And we have introduced the Dentons Aspire Scholarship last year, which provides crucial financial support to students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And we're also a proud founding member of Career Trackers, which supports First Nation students through paid internships. After this summer internship, 2/3 of our summer cohort chose to stay with us in permanent roles, which is a great example of structured support. We provide weekly yarning sessions with Career Trackers alumni now working at Dentons permanently to showcase what their future could look like, and of course, to provide mentorship. And when it comes to rebuilding lives, we've also partnered with community groups to create roles for women over 50 who face domestic violence and have been out of the workforce and are in need of work. We created work, we've paired them with senior mentors within their team and are helping them create safe and stable futures. So sometimes small actions create lasting impact. One member of our support team, and I know you mentioned this, Roman, just celebrated her 20th year with the firm. She joined us with a significant learning disability straight out of high school, and we've provided the structure, routine, and support she has needed. So I would say, Lisa, that recruitment just isn't about filling roles. We all have the ability to create opportunity and a space for people to see a future for themselves. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that beautiful segue, thank you, Maureen, to our next topic, which is all about representation. And I know in Dentons that you've really moved away from a more traditional promotional model, and you do quite a lot around sponsorship and networking. So in addition to what you have just been sharing with us, do you want to tell us a bit about how that works?
Yeah, I'd love to. When we talk about closing the gender pay gap, I believe we need to move away from relying solely on traditional promotional models, models that often depend on self-nomination and risk disadvantaging certain groups. And we all know those traditional promotional models. But the reality is highly capable people, particularly women, often hesitate to put themselves forward. And that's not because they lack ambition, but because they don't always feel seen, valued, or encouraged to step into leadership. So to address this, we've shifted our focus at Dentons to a sponsorship model, a deliberate move that encourages leaders to proactively advocate for their people. So it's about ensuring talent doesn't go unnoticed and actively helps individuals reach their potential. It's not about hoping people will opt in. It's about creating a culture where they see a future for themselves and where leaders are guiding and equipping them to get there. And the results speak for themselves. We've seen women in our partnership increase from 12% to 36%, which is a significant shift. But sponsorship alone isn't enough, as we all know. Visibility matters too. And as of this year, we've had our first female CEO, both locally and globally. We have myself as Chief Operating Officer, and 50% of our board are women, all of us here by merit. Visibility matters because it shows our people that leadership is attainable and that their hard work can take them there. Our social impact programs also create structured networking opportunities that connect our people with influential leaders across the firm. And these purposeful interactions provide guidance, mentorship, and insights on what it takes to succeed. So Lisa, by combining sponsorship, visibility, and active mentorship, we're breaking down barriers and ensuring our people know that their efforts can and will be recognized. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the fact that you've highlighted visibility. A lot of people look at sponsorship and it's kind of behind closed doors or in the secret inner chamber. And the fact that you connected all the dots, is wonderful. Roman, what are your thoughts on this?
I've got two really quick ones here. One is around when I look at some of the data around what I call those 3 U's: underrepresentation, underutilization, and unconscious bias. You look at the some of the workforce participation rates, like for example, people with disability, or even with women with disability, hasn't changed in 28 years. Dylan Alcott was saying 53.9%. We don't have a handle on the rates of our trans and gender diverse and non-binary community around employment rates, underemployment as well. And 11 out of 372 leaders in the Cultural Diversity Blueprint, Australian Human Rights Commission report 2018 showed that 11 out of 372 were Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or non-European. So where I try to focus on is a transition into leadership in a lot of work areas, getting from manager role into executive role, or from lecturer to into the professoriate, where career breaks may particularly impact the rates of transition into leadership. But I also try to engage with the conversation around people who may find compound forms of inequity because they have multiple identities. And so there is a level of maturity around when we talk about representation, we're considering intersectionality. But the second quick point I want to make is around job segregation, because I always kind of go back to Bernard Salt, demographer, who talked about what's the top 10 jobs men have been doing and what are the top 10 jobs women have been doing, and we kind of all know what they are. Tram drivers, I think, is the only one that's moved in the last 10 years for women. And so for me, and I was at a forum once, and I said, was that because like Harry Potter or something had sparked the imagination of people to work in those roles? So for me, I try to look at bridging the gap of men working in gender equity, because 95% of my colleagues are usually women or men who are part of the LGBTIQ plus community. And I'd like to sort of see a bit of a disruption where, like if I go down locally for a walk and I see construction, I want to see the women driving the heavy machinery, not just holding the signs. And I know that there has been some kind of breakthroughs, but real line management opportunities and would sort of break some of those kind of habits or the things that we do see and want to change. So job segregation is a big one. You know, all the things that keep you alive and well, and teaching, caring, education. They're all done by women, and they're all on very low wages, but they all give us the greatest benefits in society.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Roman. Steph, can you have a specific program that you mentioned earlier about to invest in retaining women? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's actually to invest in retaining them, but also to actually provide opportunity for women to re-enter the workforce. So it's called Relaunch. It's been running for about 4 years now, and it's open to women who have been on a career break or caring duties or whatever it may be, and be out of the workforce for up to 10 years. So what we'll do is we will bring them into the business. We will reskill them in the appropriate technology. Technology is a fast-moving area. We know that skills that we had 5 years ago are no longer relevant. So we very early on in the D&I journey, which I was part of, we realised that we weren't able to recruit in enough women to make our gender ambitions for the company. So we thought, why can't we just build a program where we knew women were wanting to get back into tech, but they couldn't because they had been de-skilled really because of their time out of the workforce. So we worked with Salesforce actually, and we worked on a program specifically in that first year. We brought in, I think, 14 women, of which 95% of them are still in the business. So they've been with us for 4 years now. And we provided a mentorship program with the women that were already working in our business, so that they could learn, and that it was almost like a retention program in itself, because the women that were being their sponsors and their mentors were actually seeing the social good that this program was bringing in as well. So that's been running for 4 years now. We have 90 to 95% retention rate of the women that we brought into that program, and they help build our inclusive culture as well. Most of those women are involved in our Women at Capgemini, or Women in AI, or Women in Data, or delivery groups. They belong to a lot of our intersectional groups, such as parents and carers, or any of the other communities that we have in the business. But really, the other thing I wanted to talk to just in this retention of women is, I work for a professional services company. We provide services to clients. And one of the best things that we can do is try to team with our clients and for businesses to team with their suppliers to ensure that we're providing flexible work opportunities for women. Because I know that, sometimes we'll go to a client site and we'll be very restricted in how our people work on site. And other times I can go in and talk to some of our big clients, and we can work away, to actually ensure that our policies link together, and we're providing opportunities not only for our staff, but for their staff as well. And I think, there is a opportunity for businesses to work together on this and to look at the supply chain to see how your suppliers are actually being treated as well down the supply chain, and see if you can make a change in that, in the way that you contract and the way that you bring in people into your business. So just a race.
Yeah, no, it's a great initiative. I think working up and downstream is really important, and you can bring a lot of your knowledge to people that maybe don't have the resources that Capgemini does, which is fantastic. Shaun, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really am passionate about sponsorship and being a way to short circuit the hierarchy that's been built from, I guess, hundreds of years of systemic bias. And I often say that, you know, it is an absolute privilege to be in the role that I am in, and with that privilege comes opportunities. And you know, some simple things that I find that I can do with my role is I often get networking opportunities or opportunities to, you know, speak at global conferences or something like that, and that's such a great opportunity to short circuit the hierarchy and provide opportunities to people in the business that have high potential and need that visibility. And you know, one of the interesting things is when I found when you are networking in those forums and you have short circuited a hierarchy, you have this. I found that I had an imposter syndrome when I was kind of joining those forums and thinking, oh my gosh, these people are amazing. Like, and so I often work with the people that you're giving those opportunities to go, well, what have you got in your back pocket? You're going to meet some amazing people, and you are an amazing person, and you have some amazing experiences. So fill your back pocket with those experiences that you will talk to when you meet these people that you've been sort of looking up to. And you know, it's just some simple stuff like that can go a long way, I think.
But I think just to touch on what was discussed earlier, we hear from women on panels all the time that it's that one pivotal moment where somebody else saw something in them and gave them the confidence and said, yeah, you know, you do have stuff to put in your back pocket. You are amazing. Yes, you can do it. That makes them step out into a role that they didn't think they could do. And we hear it time and time again. And so, you know, all these programs that you've mentioned are just so important, so critical, because otherwise many of them, and I'm sure we've got many men as well, would be shy and retiring and sitting back thinking, I'm not the one for this job, or, you know, who am I to put myself forward? So, yeah, some really fantastic work that you're all doing there, which is great. And some of you may or may not know that we're launching an Empower Her Future program for girls going between school to try and actually expose more of them. As Roman pointed out, more women are still ending up in not necessarily high-paying roles, and we'd like them to be exposed to more of the roles of the future, which tends to be in the more tech engineering sort of space where we're seeing a lot of growth and AI and things like that. So
Okay, have we, Lisa has frozen her screen?
I think lost her, yeah.
I guess we can continue on, do you think, until Lisa joins us?
Sounds good, Roman. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a feeling the next question was around intersectionality and data. So I might read some notes until Lisa joins us. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Sure.
So Steph, given that you've won an award for intersectionality, it's a great topic for you to kick off. To be clear, we see intersectionality as the additional challenge faced if gender intersects with racial disability. Can you share with us the importance of creating inclusive workplaces and what has Capgemini doing to achieve this?
Look, I think inclusive workplaces they're essential now, right? I mean, it's not about how do you, or if you want to create it. You have to create an environment where people can be their best selves, and they can be productive, and they can be innovative. And that's the whole business case for diversity and inclusion is you want a more productive and more innovative and an environment where people can feel relaxed and able to do that. So the way that we've done it in Australia with Capgemini is that I've actually let the communities, we actually established what we call communities. So what you would probably call ERGs or employee network groups, we call communities of like-minded people. And we'll give them a sort of name to reflect that. So parents and carers, or out front, so anyone who is in that rainbow area and so forth, and women. We have about 11 communities in together. But what we actually do is we have a hub and spoke model. So in the middle of all of those communities, we have an intersectional community, and all of our leaders from each of our communities sit on that intersectional group, and we work through ways in which we don't just talk about women, or we just don't talk about out front, or we just don't talk about parents. We talk about how they intersect together. And all of our groups actually start to work through is, well, actually, what are the areas that we need to focus on, that we actually start to need looking at in our culture that we might need to get better at, or we're having some issues over here. Does that relate to this group over there? And that group will help drive some of the programs, some of the initiatives, some of the things that we put in place for the culture that we're trying to build. And we've had some really, really interesting outcomes from that when it's employee-led and employee-driven. We have overarching programs that we will implement across our group around our leaders having training in unconscious bias. But from a neurodiverse network, we actually went, well, actually, we need to train our managers in how to better manage and be aware of and create teams with neurodiverse people. And when you work in tech, the percentages of people who are actually neurodiverse is actually a lot higher. So we really needed to look at how can we do that. And from that, we have created lots of different programs that have been implemented at the global level. So when you allow the people, have a people first approach to inclusion and belonging and safety, how to make that safe, inclusive workplace, you end up looking in places that you never thought you were going to look as a D&I professional, or as a HR person, or as a leader, as a manager, and sometimes you find that something that might come from the requirements or the challenges of one group applies to a lot of people, and we're taking more of an allies for everyone approach at Capgemini now, where it's very important to have those communities of people. But what's more important than anything is that we build a culture of trust and curiosity and wanting to learn about each other, and how do we actually have those respectful relationships with people.
Yeah,
so,
thanks. And I was going to say there's some great yes.
It's just about understanding that no one person is just one thing.
Yeah, I love the co-design principles weaved into there as well. Absolutely, we can definitely learn from going into those spaces. I might pass it on to Shaun and then Maureen, and then I'll talk a little bit about intersectionality data. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
So Shaun, any comments to add on to that?
Oh, look, I just echo Steph's comments a lot. And, diversity means nothing without inclusion, really. And all the benefits we've been talking to don't happen without an inclusive culture. So inclusion is one of our core values at Barwon Water, one of our 5 core values, to make it really overt, and one of our key leadership capabilities as well, just to make sure all our people leaders are mindful of what it takes to be an inclusive leader. And, again, picking up the threads from Steph, curiosity and courage I want to for us to highlight too. And we actually use our Inclusion Council to really focus on curiosity and courage. Curiosity to kind of share different perspectives and make us curious to keep learning, but also holding us to account in terms of making sure that we do have the courage and are displaying courage in creating change in the action plans that they expect us to deliver on.
Great, and I'll go to Maureen. So I've texted Lisa, who I think is coming from Cape Otway, so the internet connection might get quite windy down there. So I'll go to Maureen next.
Yeah, thank you. And Shaun, love the idea of an Inclusion Council. It's a great idea. At Dentons, we've moved from grassroots efforts to company-led initiatives. And this was really a deliberate approach, as we would prefer volunteering efforts are with the community. So our people should be no longer working to create an inclusive culture at our firm, but regardless of the double glazing that may be happening due to intersectionality of the glass ceiling. So to ensure that we understand the diversity of our people, we do provide the option to disclose that to us. However, we reimagined how to ask the questions to our employees. So we broadened the questions so individuals could share who they are without feeling boxed in by labels. For example, instead of asking direct questions, we instead introduced broader questions about attraction and identity. And as a result, disclosure rates unbelievably doubled. And so now over 15% of our people have shared the diversity of their sexuality. And when you look at this alongside other data, like the ancestry of our people, closely reflecting ABS data, our 12% disability disclosure rate, 13% of our people caring for someone with disability, 7% identifying as neurodiverse, and over 3% identifying as Aboriginal. It shows you something important, that inclusion isn't about labels, but it's about naturally building a culture that attracts diversity, because these people know they can feel safe, valued, and more importantly, themselves.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for that. And I love cultural safety and psychological safety for people to have comfort in sharing personal information. I might just spend a minute just on some of the insights into, I was going to be asked a question around intersectional data and analysis, and then we'll finally finish off on allyship, if that's okay. So for me, I'm an analytical chemist. I love data. I'm a bit of a data nerd. I've done a lot of gender pay gap intersectional analysis and intersectional analysis of culture surveys. And I find that one of the biggest professions in diversity, equity, inclusion is data literacy, and not just for the profession, but for leaders as well. It's complex, and poor data can lead to very broad actions or crude targets, and can actually cause some damage as well. And a recent audit I did, gender pay gap analysis, I received an Excel spreadsheet with, no kidding, 690,000 cells of data, which I had to clean and analyze. And it takes years of practice to see patterns and how the data sets are connected. And we're getting a bit more clever in that. But sometimes singular figures, we see that with pay gaps. If you have a 0% pay gap like the AFL, it doesn't mean that you've done everything you've needed and the culture is perfect. And similarly, if you get the Australian Public Sector Cultural Diversity Report, they have a crude target around cultural diversity around 25%. But when you dive into the detail, you'll look at some of the leadership representation, and then some, like the foreign affairs, are 19%. They're getting close to the target, but others like defence are 7%, and then also the ABS is around 5%. So then, if you're making critical decisions and you don't have those voices in leadership, then you can actually you won't have you won't have the representation there. You won't be able to do that co-design work, and you can miss things. The insights from diversity data can get you to the truth of the matter, and behind every diversity data set, there's a human story. So the national crisis around family and domestic violence, one woman killed a year by men, one woman a week by male. One case of sexual harassment is one too many. So there is a human story behind each of these pieces of data, and having that sort of data can evoke strong emotive experiences and get in buy-in. But we also need to look at integrity of data, because we have very different terminologies. There are 8,000 different cultural heritages and ancestries, and sometimes we can get stuck in terminology, for example, cold, calm, women of colour, BIPOC, multicultural, etc. So I'll finally finish off that some of the intersectional analysis that I've been doing around culture surveys is to look at some of the key questions, because aggregate data can mask some of the data that's underneath. So usually when I ask questions around mainstream employment situations, not only how have you felt included, or do you feel like you belong, but what's been your employment experience? What's been your promotion experience? Do you believe it to be fair? Your recruitment experience? Are you feeling creative and inspired, or safe to speak up? We do then often see variation between men and women, even up to 10%, or with people with disability. So you might have an 80%, I feel like I belong, and then you go to your intersex community, it might be 20%, or women with disability, it might be 40%. And I think when we it's complex, because when you do drill down, you then look at the employment experience and say, well, why is that different to the aggregate figure? And you start to get to the truth of the matter. Lisa's joined us. We've just finished the data section, so we're onto the allyship area now. But I might give someone else a start on male allyship.
How
Thanks.
about I take over? Thank you. I've had some unusual technical difficulties. It's always a challenge. Why don't we get Shaun to start talking a little bit about male allyship, seeing as you're the other guy on the panel, and let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Well, for me, a light bulb went off. I was lucky enough to be invited to partner with one of our high-performing senior leaders in a program for executive leadership for women in water. And that was a real insight to me in the need to change from being a passive supporter to an ally and advocate. And the systemic change that was needed and that is needed couldn't be made by passive supporters, basically. And so I always viewed myself as an inclusive person, but that's not enough, basically. And so there was a couple of deep insights through that. Me understanding the why behind the need for dramatic change, and there's some stark stats that Roman was speaking about before. And there's lots of stats that kind of give you a real drive as to why there's a need for change, and then building some real clarity around sort of what leadership is needed to create that change. And myself and the person that were in the program, we sort of distilled it down to being curious and committed to learning, to being courageous and stubbornly optimistic, to being collaborative and building trust and care, nurture for yourself and nurture for others as well, basically, because sometimes it is a tough journey and you do need that yourself and others aspect in that care. Then really the importance of role modelling myself in terms of what I do and how I live my life and how I work and how I balance my family life and work life as well. And then we jointly actively went then to use our positions of privilege to change some aspects of our organisation. So we reviewed our values with those leadership capabilities in mind, and also reviewed some of our leadership development programs. We also ran forums similar to this where we just told stories on the why to really kind of build the why. So people shared their personal inclusion stories, and that built a passion within leaders within the business. And then reviewed when I mentioned we reviewed our leadership program, it's really a couple of fronts that we thought made a big difference. So leaders being able to facilitate storytelling sessions, to facilitate sessions on the why within their own teams, and then also to move to those outcome-based rather than sort of capability-based focuses on roles. And how to hold inclusive forums and your role as a people leader in every meeting you run and how you run it and likes as well. So, just some examples that shift from being a supporter to an advocate and ally.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks so much for sharing that, Shaun. Steph, you would have a number of thoughts about how we get more male allies on board. Do you want to share them with us?
I just remember when I started in my role, one of the things that worked for me is just one person at a time. It was how do we, encourage our allies, male allies, obviously for gender equity, but also all people for allies for everyone. How do we change those hearts and minds in one person who will then go and change somebody else's mind and so forth? And I think it's really important that, and back to intersectionality, really, no one is just one thing. So if you can tap into what is it that you've had as a challenge, or how can you provide some empathy, or how you can be brave enough to be able to take a stand against seeing when people are not given the same opportunities or getting the same outcomes as somebody else. You can build that allyship in that way. But also, to Maureen's point, having that structured corporate program around allyship, all around learning about bias or about how to be an inclusive leader is very important as well. So I think it's a two-way street there. There's a grassroots up approach, but also giving people the tools around how to be a better leader and how to be a better ally as part of that leadership.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I think the most pivotal moment for me was when someone reminded me that if you sit there and accept something, you're actually tacitly approving it. If you don't step out of your comfort zone to say something, and it was a tendency in management, wasn't it, to always go and address people, quietly, take the problems away and talk to people, not in public. And, that left the person maybe who had been disadvantaged feeling that you supported the perpetrator. So, yeah, some really valuable stuff there. Maureen, did you have anything more to add to this before we swing back to Roman?
I do. For me, allyship is the before thought. So real change happens when equity becomes a shared responsibility, not just something we ask of those already committed to it. As I mentioned, we've encouraged leaders to step up, not just men, but women too, who can sometimes be guilty of pulling up the ladder behind them. We expect our leaders to take responsibility for ensuring our pipeline is healthy, advocating for high potential talent, and also for creating space for others to succeed. And that's not an easy thing when you consider client sharing specifically in law. We've also challenged gender stereotypes. I've spoken about men now seeing themselves in careers within our support function, but beyond that, we're working hard to normalize the uptake of benefits that were once seen as for women. Men at Dentons are encouraged to take the full 26 weeks of family leave on offer, and 70% of those eligible are doing just that. And this shift is critical in reinforcing that caregiving isn't the exclusive domain of women. So, being an ally is important, but building a workplace where everyone feels responsible for driving equity, that's really where the real change begins. Thank you.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you for that. And Roman, you've actually written a great article for us as well, but
Thank you. I'll put it in the chat box, and I'll try to keep it to 30 seconds because I'm looking at the 1+1. But look, for me, allyship, and I echo the sentiments of everyone else, is something I believe it's earned and demonstrated through your actions. A lot of men, I find, feel that they need to walk on eggshells and they're not engaged, or social media impacts young men. But as you've seen probably with this conversation, is allyship in action, that we're engaging in conversation with humility and respect and knowing our place in the conversation. But we're not passive about it. We're actually we're people who try to clear the path of resistance. So I thought I might leave it at that then, and that's my sort of 30-second wrap up on allyship. But there's an article there, and please practice the tips.
Yeah, wonderful.
For the
Thank
men
you.
who are out there.
Thank you all. What a fabulous discussion. I'm sure you've learned a great deal about why these people, why these organisations were award winners, some amazing practices, and how easy is it to adopt some of these things rather than reinventing the wheel. You've already heard what worked really well and how people are reinforcing and building on it. Wouldn't it be great if we all just kept improving on the good stuff rather than having to start from scratch every time? So the Gender Equity Awards are open for 2025. We encourage all of you to, nominate someone. You'll actually just make their day. It's so nice to be called out for good behaviour and encouraged. So if nothing else, just think about it as an opportunity to say thank you to somebody. And I want to say a huge thank you to our panellists today for sharing their experiences. Thank you to Maureen. Thank you to Roman. Thank you to Shaun and to Steph. We really appreciate it.